in the last video, we were talking about appraisals of stressors. Now let's think about our responses to those stressors. In general, we want our responses to not interfere with our ability to handle a situation. So the neurotypical and resilient options here seem to work pretty well. The sensitized line here is overreactive, and the person is likely to feel pretty overwhelmed. So not effective. The Yerkes-Dodson law expands on some of the ideas that we talked about in the last video, but instead of saying, stressed or not, we're talking about what is the appropriate amount of stress for a situation, the appropriate amount of arousal or excitement. And stress, arousal, excitement, all physiologically seem to be, to feel the same. The difference seems to be up here in terms of how we label it. So for some tasks, like circling every E on a page in your text, is really easy. And so we want a relatively high amount of arousal. On the other hand, some tasks are very complicated. Let's say one of the calculus faculty came to class and gave you an exam. You are likely to be overwhelmed and would need to calm yourself down in order to perform as well as you can. Now, many tasks are more here, that we want to be interested, engaged in the task, but we don't want to be so interested and engaged that we're overwhelmed. So it's matching our level of arousal to the situation. In an earlier video in this fourth unit, we were talking about the locus coeruleus in attention. And one of the things you see on this chart, which is looking at the Yerkes-Dodson law or inverted U hypothesis, it's talked about in a number of different ways. And the locus coeruleus, which is seen in these graphs, is less active when we're drowsy, not very alert. It is more active when we are focused, and less active or very active when we are scanning and concerned. So, as we've talked about before, stress takes a number of different forms. What happens here neurologically and neurotransmitters, our hormones, that's particularly cortisol and adrenaline that sort of bathe our body with stress hormones. How we think about things and what we choose or how we choose to react. Now, our reactions seem to take 4 different forms: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And we've already seen some of these as we've been talking about people over the course of the semester, but let's continue this here. A safe social response is one where we are feeling calm, safe, and open in a situation. We're alert, awake, we breathe slowly and deeply, our heart's beating calmly, and we can think and plan. This is a good thing. This is where we want to be. A fight response is when we start taking things personally, become defensive, dominate the situation, argue, become angry, enraged, pushing away. We have difficulty relaxing, our heart races, our body's sweating. We're breathing quickly, trying to oxygenate our, our body. Our muscles are tense, our hands and fists are clenched. We're talking louder, maybe even, screaming. And, our thinking tends to be very critical at this point, very emotional. This is different than the fight response or the flight response. In the flight response, instead of trying to engage with a situation, we're trying to avoid the situation. And we may do this by focusing on our to-do list, by eating, drinking, using substances, turning up the music, changing the subject, leaving the room. And again, we're having difficulty relaxing and we feel uncomfortable. Again, our heart is racing, our body's sweating, we're breathing quickly. Again, our muscles are tense. Our speech is often quiet and rambling. Our eyes are distracted. We're avoiding eye contact, which can seem threatening to others. Our thoughts are racing, or they're hyperfixated on a subject. So that's flight, fight, flight. Here's freeze. When we freeze, we notice ourselves shutting down, checking out, feeling numb, empty, blank. And our body is generally detached, our heart is slow or imperceptible. We may have difficulty breathing, our muscles are weak. We may have difficulty talking, we may have difficulty making eye contact, and we may feel pretty spacey. And finally, fawn. Fawn is when we're focused on the other person. Rather than paying attention to our needs, we're focusing on the other person. We over-explain, over-defend our thoughts, feelings, and choices. We're paying attention to what the other person needs rather than what we need. And this can feel pretty overwhelming. So here's how Jeanette McCurdy describes it. She says, "What's my identity even? How would I even know? I've pretended to be other people my whole life, my whole childhood and adolescence and young adulthood. The years that you're supposed to be to spend finding yourself, I was spending pretending to be other people. The years that you're supposed to spend building character, I was spending building characters." And then she says, her grandpa says to her, a little girl shouldn't have to worry about her entire family. What? Not because I didn't hear what he said, but because I'm confused. Of course, a little girl should worry about her entire family. That's what little girls do. And he said, I just think you deserve to be a kid. Now, what you can see in these last two examples is an example of fawning, that she is not focused on her needs, but on her mother's needs. And she's doing this in a very disproportional way. If she were 40 and her mother was dying, then it would make sense for her to respond as she did. As an 8-year-old, it is not her job to take care of her mom. I'm going to stop here and say goodbye. I'll see you in the next video.